بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم تلك القرى نقص عليك من أنبائها وقال عليه الصلاة والسلام الخلافة بعدي 30 سنة ثم تكون ملكا أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. Respected brothers and sisters, in today's khutbah I intend on completing the series of lectures that I started at least a year ago from what I can remember, and it had to do with the word Khalifa that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Surah Al-Baqarah early on when He talks about the creation of Adam alayhi salam. And from there, just to recap and remind you, we talked about the four khulafa, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali radiallahu anhum, which were the rightly guided caliphs. And immediately after that, which was the last khutbah that I delivered, just as a reminder, we talked about the Umayyad period of Islam, or the Umayyad dynasty. And in today's khutbah, I intend to talk about Ad-Dawlat al-Uthmaniyya, the Ottoman Empire. And I have a lot to say, but I'm very confident that inshallah you'll be able to keep up and follow along with whatever is being said. You may be right at the outset wondering, what about everything in between, right? So I'm actually skipping over for the sake of brevity, because if we talk about after the Umayyad period, if we talk about the Abbasids, we talk about the Ayyubids, we talk about the Mamluks and the Mughal Empire in the subcontinent, then these khutbahs are, this series is going to probably go on for another year. So I don't want to tire you by talking about these things. So far, whatever I've talked about, it has been very intentional. And the reason why I spoke about the Umayyad period, the Umayyads, is because this was the first empire, you can say, Islamic empire, that was right after the era of the four rightly guided caliphs. So in that is actually huge lessons that we can learn. That what did the Ummah do when we lost that golden era of Islam where we had the rightly guided caliphs, right? We had these amazing, huge Sahaba companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam who had now left the world, and now aside from the companions, there's other people, other Muslims that are coming into rule. So obviously there's huge lessons that could be learned from that. And I'm not discounting by any means the contributions that all these great empires and these dynasties they had to Islam. Like if we discuss, for example, I'm just going to give you one example of all of these different empires, like the Abbasis, right? Which is the Abbasid Caliphate or the empire. That is actually, the rule of the Abbasids is a period which is famously known as the Golden Age of Islam. When Westerners or Orientalists, when they talk about Islamic history, when they say the golden era or the golden age of Islam, it's actually known as this period, the Abbasids. This is when the famous Baytul Hikmah was actually established, Baytul Hikmah. And Baytul Hikmah was just like a huge library of all kinds of books, and all kinds of people from the different religions, they could come and they can contribute to that expansive library in order to promote knowledge. And so this was facilitated under the Abbasid dynasty. And in this period, the Islamic world made great contributions to all sorts of fields, including art, literature, philosophy, science, medicine, mathematics, and so on. After the Abbasids were the Ayyubids. Obviously, if I ask the question, maybe inshallah just to get some participation, who was the founder of the Ayyubid dynasty, if you can say inshallah? Anybody know who that is? Salahuddin Ayyubi, rahimahullah. That's where the name, the Ayyubis, comes from, right? The Ayyubids, in English we call it. He was the founder, and he needs obviously no introduction, right? He was the one that liberated Palestine. And then of course there were the Mamluks. These people overthrew the Ayyubids, and then they came into power. The contribution that they had towards Islam is that these Mamluks were actually the ones that expelled the last crusaders from the Levant. Syria, Palestine, the area that's known as Sham and the Levant. The Mamluks are the ones that expelled the crusaders from there, and they basically ended the era of the crusades by that. Similarly, they saved the whole Islamic world from the notorious Mongols. This was in the Battle of Ain Jalut, which is in present-day Palestine. So this is the contribution that the Mamluks had. So I'm not trying to discount by skipping over this history. I'm not trying to discount that. But what I'm doing now is fast forwarding to the Ottoman era. Number one, for the sake of brevity, in order to make it short and concise and to help us digest all the information. But also to emphasize, my dear brothers and sisters, that all this greatness that we have been talking about for the better part of the last year in the khutbahs that I have had the opportunity to deliver before you, all that greatness was ours. We as Muslims, not as Arabs or as non-Arabs, not because of our different cultures, which may have beautiful elements to them, but the reason was our unity under La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. That is the thing that united us, and that's the thing that took us forward, and that's what led to our greatness. And this is not some fairy tale that we have talked about. It's not in some fantasy land, in some prehistoric, dinosaur age that we're talking about. We're talking about the fact that we only lost this greatness. We actually, physically, tangibly lost this greatness no more than 100 years ago. It was only 100 years ago that we had this entity which is called the Ottoman Empire, which was Islamic in its nature. The identity was that of an Islamic one. So speaking about the Ottoman Empire, one of the amazing facts about it is that it was one of the most powerful empires to ever exist on earth. And the Ottoman Empire existed from 1299 to 1922 or 1923, different estimates as to exactly when it ended, because the truth is that towards the end of its life, the Ottoman Empire was basically a corpse walking around. It was a corpse walking around. I forget the name that Westerners used to refer to the Ottoman Empire as, but I think it was the sick man of the East. Huh? The sick man of Europe? Yeah, that's what the Western world used to refer to the Ottoman Empire as. The sick man of these. Because the reason was that towards its end, it was like a corpse walking around, a body without any soul. It was just rasmi, it was just ritualistically, present. The Ottoman Empire was founded by a man by the name of Uthman, also known as Uthman Ghazi. Ghazi, the warrior, basically. So the story goes that his father, Uthman's father, actually led his tribe from Central Asia into Anatolia as they were fleeing from the Mongol onslaught. So the Mongolians, the Mongols, these guys were crazy warriors. Anyone and anything that came in their path, they were annihilating them. They were ruthless warriors. So Uthman Ghazi's father took his tribe, he was a leader of his tribe, and basically fled to Anatolia. And the Seljuk king, because Anatolia at that time was in Seljuk territory, so the Sultan, what he did is he actually made this tribe of Uthman Ghazi's father, the whole tribe, basically guard the border. So Anatolia was along the border, so this tribe came and settled there. The Seljuk Sultan allowed them with the condition that they protect the border from that side. So it was a match made in paradise. And so this tribe began to exist there, and they began to increase, they began to get more powerful, and the story goes on. So Uthman the First was inclined towards the deen. He was a religious individual, and he even had close relationships to the local scholars that were available to him. And once Uthman actually had a dream in which a moon rose from the scholar's chest, the scholar that he was in close contact with. A moon rose from the chest of this scholar and set in the chest of Uthman the First. So the interpretation, actually the dream goes on that a tree sprouted from the navel, and the shade of this tree encompassed the whole entire world. Beneath the shade there were mountains, and streams flowed forth from the foot of each mountain. Some people drank from the running waters, others watered gardens, while others caused fountains to flow. So the interpretation obviously is clear that through him and his efforts there would be a great benefit that would come to the ummah. The Ottoman Empire at its peak spanned in the north from Austria, Hungary, right, all the way to in the south, Yemen, and from Algeria in the west to Iraq in the east. huge swaths of land were under the rule of the Ottoman Empire. And in its 600-year reign, about 600 years is how long it lasted, it mostly saw progress. Most of the time during the Ottoman Empire, there was progress, there was expansion, and there was development. If we look at the military capabilities of the Ottoman Empire, well, the Ottoman army was highly disciplined and feared for its organization and its elite troops, particularly the Janissaries. We call them Jan Nisa, right? The Janissaries, they were particularly feared around the world because of this military prowess that the Ottoman Empire it had. If you look at it from an economic perspective, their influence was such that they had control over most of the important trade routes between Europe and Asia. Rather, all of the important trade routes between Europe and Asia were under Ottoman control, which brought significant wealth to the empire. When you talk about the political stability of the Ottoman Empire, the centralized government under the Sultan provided stability across the diverse regions under the Ottoman rule, because everybody was under one Sultan. So it basically unified everybody, and everybody was on the same page in spite of these vast lands that the Ottoman Empire was governing and ruling over. And this is particularly, all these points, they particularly stand out in the context that we live in today. My dear brothers and sisters, look at their military strength that they had. Look at the economic influence that they had. And what are we doing today? How are we conducting ourselves today? If you look at, from a cultural perspective, the Ottoman Empire was the center of art, science, and learning. And they contributed significantly to the regional culture around them. So these are some of the amazing accomplishments and amazing things that pertain to the Ottoman Empire. And in all this expansion, in all this development, there was only a brief period that the empire entered, which was a period of decline. And that period was between 1740 and 1768. And this period was a period of relative peace. There was coexistence, there was no fighting, and there was no wars and stuff going on. And this is exactly the time when the Ottoman military system fell behind. It fell behind in comparison to its European rivals. So when this period of peace overtook and military development stopped, this was the same time that the European rivals and the other powers that were there, they developed their military capabilities. And as a consequence, the Ottoman Empire suffered severe military defeats in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. It was because of that period in which military development had stopped. That's what basically Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even mentions in the Quran. And when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for example, was sending Mu'adh radiallahu anhu to Yemen, he said, إِيَّاكَ وَالتَّنَعُمْ فَإِنَّ عِبَادَ اللَّهِ لَيْسُوا بِمُتَنَعِمِينَ. He said, oh Mu'adh, when you go there as a governor, as a ruler, beware of luxuries. Beware of luxuries and enjoyment and benefiting and loving the things of this dunya. No, because the servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they do not engage and preoccupy themselves in things of luxury and the luxuries of this world. Anyhow, moving forward, the accomplishments of the Ottoman Empire, as we just basically mentioned, that it is known as one of history's most powerful empires. After 1354, the year 1354, that's when the Ottomans began to cross into Europe. And it is with the conquest of Constantinople under the leadership of Mehmed the Conqueror. Mehmed is how they, in Turkish they say Muhammad, right? Muhammad is his name. But Mehmed the Conqueror, he was the one that ended the Byzantine Empire in a battle that took place in 1453. So they started to cross over into Europe 1354, and the Byzantine Empire officially was conquered in 1453. You may have heard of the name of Suleiman the Magnificent. He was this was a name given to him by the West. He was also called the lawgiver within the empire. So his reign was actually the peak of the empire's power and prosperity. And his reign was basically from 1520 to 1566. Constantinople, now as we know, is Istanbul, but it would continue to be the capital of the empire until it ended in 1922. So from the time of Suleiman the Magnificent, Constantinople, which is Istanbul, it became the capital of the Ottoman Empire, and it lasted all the way up until its end in what we can say is 1922. Throughout Ottoman history, my dear brothers and sisters, as we mentioned, there was a large collection of libraries that was built with original and translations of books from other cultures. So it was an era of knowledge, whether it's coming from different cultures, different languages. Every knowledge that could be amassed and accumulated was accumulated under Ottoman supervision. There was a scholar by the name of Taqiyuddin Muhammad bin Ma'ruf Shami, who was the author of more than 90 books on a variety of subjects like engineering, mathematics, astronomy, mechanics, optics, clocks, natural philosophy. Okay, this individual built what was called the Constantinople Observatory of Taqiyuddin in 1577. 1577. This is, guys, before even America was founded. Like before the Constitution of the United States, we're talking 1577. This is a man by the name of Taqiyuddin who establishes the Constantinople Observatory. Subhanallah, look at their high level of thinking. Look at the intellect that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed them with. The Ottoman Empire is credited with the invention of surgical instruments, which are in use today. Surgical instruments which are being used today are credited to the Ottoman Empire. For example, forceps, catheters, invention of the Ottomans. Scalpels and lancets, which are used for surgery, these are attributed to the Ottomans. As well as pincers, that's another surgical instrument. Pincers, that is also an invention of the Ottomans. My dear brothers and sisters, not only that, not only all of this that has been mentioned, but the empire is the empire. This empire of the Ottomans is the empire that offered safe passage to Sephardic Jews who were fleeing the persecution in the Iberian Peninsula, which is Spain and Portugal basically. There was a large concentration of Jewish people in Spain and Portugal, and there was a law that was passed, which now Spain and Portugal in those days was Christian. Okay, and there was a law that was passed where Jews are to be persecuted, they're to be killed. So they started to flee from Spain and Portugal, the Iberian Peninsula, and they sought refuge in no other place except for the Ottoman Empire. In an article of the Financial Times that I came across, which is dated November 23rd, 2021, the author's William Dalrymple, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but William Dalrymple in his article of the Financial Times said, I'm quoting, November 23rd, 2021, when the Catholic kings evicted the Jews from Granada, they were granted asylum within the Ottoman Empire, end quote. So by the end of the 16th century, my dear brothers and sisters, the Ottoman Empire had the largest Jewish communities in the world. By the end, again I repeat, by the end of the 16th century, the Ottoman Empire had the largest Jewish communities in the world. This is what we offered to them. This is what we offered to the world, and we continue to offer them. And we are proud of that, in spite of what we see going on. But we are proud of the doors that we open for people that were being persecuted, that were being murdered and killed and massacred. We saved them. We helped them. And now coming to the end, as we are running out of time, the major event, my dear brothers and sisters, that led to the abolishment of the empire was getting involved, basically, to summarize it, getting involved in someone else's fight. We were pulled in, the Ottoman Empire was pulled in to somebody else's conflict. And what I mean is, does anybody know what I'm talking about? World War I. They were pulled in, Jazakallah, you guys are paying attention and awake and not falling asleep. I just have to check that every now and then, right? So we were pulled into World War I. And the Ottoman Empire ended up siding with the Central Powers, okay, as opposed to the Allies. And basically we suffered the defeat. After the Ottoman defeat in World War I, a man by the name of Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, he saw and he seized the opportunity to pander to his British masters. And on nationalistic grounds, purely nationalistic, this man abolished the Arabic language. He abolished everything that has to do with Arab culture or Arab society. And basically everything was going to be in the Turkish language. So purely on nationalistic grounds, he saw and he seized the opportunity to overthrow the Caliph. And the Caliph at that time was, one more pop quiz question, Abdul Majid, right? Abdul Majid, Abdul Majid, he was the one that was ousted, he was overthrown, he was sent into exile into France. France is where he lived his final days of his life. And coincidentally, guess who became the first prime minister of Turkey? None other than Ataturk. Right? What a coincidence. What a beautiful coincidence. The same man who becomes the reason for overthrowing the caliph and sending him into exile, he all of a sudden becomes the first prime minister of the Republic of Turkey. Now, upon the demands that the people, so there was already a lot of nationalistic sentiment that was created. Mustafa Kemal Ataturk and his party and others, they created a lot of nationalistic sentiment. People were not willing to unite on Islam. They were not willing to unite anymore on the kalima. They wanted to do it based on nationalistic grounds. So what they did as a little plan that they had is they demanded the Sultan to hold elections. Now the Sultan, perhaps naively, and maybe to neutralize the threat that he's facing from these seculars, he agreed to hold elections, but obviously, because of that nationalistic sentiment, he lost. And he basically was only a spiritual Khalifa from now on. He did not have any political power. He did not have any power to make laws or abolish laws or anything like that. And now, as I wrap up, in the years prior to the abolition of the caliphate, the ummah was not happy with the condition of what's going on. And one open example of that is the Indian-based Khilafat movement. From India, there was a Khilafat movement to make an effort to try and preserve and protect the caliphate, the Islamic caliphate, before it's too late. And even before this, the Khilafat movement, in the late 1800s, Sultan Abdul Hamid II, he sent a man by the name of Jamaluddin Afghani to India. Jamaluddin Afghani is described as a person who did not care about minor differences in Islamic jurisprudence. Do I do Raf'ul Yadayn or do I not? Do I say Ameen out loud or do I not? The kinds of things that we fight about nowadays. This was a person who was not interested in that. Rather, he was more interested in organizing a united response to Western pressure. So Jamaluddin Afghani was sent by the Sultan to India to get support against Western attacks against the empire. A large number of Muslim religious leaders, they began working to spread awareness amongst the Muslims and to develop participation on behalf of the caliphate. One huge name, and I'm ending now inshallah. One huge name is Sheikh Mahmud al-Hasan, rahimahullah, who attempted to organize a national war of independence against the British Raj. Because if you don't know, all the subcontinent brothers, they already know, of course, but the British, they ruled, which was called the British Raj, in the subcontinent for more than 200 years, right? For well over 200 years. So they attempted to make this war for the independence and the liberation of India against the British, who were colonizing them and enslaving them. And I say attempted because Sheikh Rahimahullah, he was arrested in 1916 and he was imprisoned in the notorious jail of Malta. So on March 3rd, 1924, to the delight of Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, the Turkish National Assembly, they abolished the caliphate. And they sent Sultan Abdul Majid into exile to France. And the last point, my dear brothers and sisters, this is very important. And I'm ending on this note on purpose. This is very intentional. The same month that the caliphate was abolished, the Egyptian Maliki scholar of Azhar by the name of Sheikh Muhammad Jizawi, rahimahullah, he formed what's called the Greater Committee of Religious Knowledge. This was in direct response to the collapse of the caliphate. And this committee, they made a resolution which was, and I'm quoting here, I'm quoting the end of this resolution. It says, please pay attention here, quote, "Now therefore it has been decided to convene an Islamic conference in which all Muslim nations shall be represented in order to consider who should be appointed caliph," end quote. This committee was to be formed. This, conference was to take place, and it was scheduled for May 13th, 1926, called the Cairo Caliphate Conference. If you search that up on Google, Cairo Caliphate Conference, you're not even going to get many results at all. It does not talk about 1926. I wonder why. I wonder why they don't extensively talk about the Cairo Caliphate Conference. With this, my respected brothers and elders, I would like to end this series that has been going on for close to about a year on this positive note. My dear brothers and sisters, maybe one of the things that we need to do is perhaps start again where we left off. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the understanding and the ability to practice. Wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.